New book out this week, Macho Man, The Untamed, Unbelievable Life of Randy Savage. Came out yesterday officially, right?
Yes, sir.
How's release week been?
It's been like a release 3 weeks basically. We started because it built around something like you want your book to have buzz along with other things, so it's been built up to WrestleMania this weekend.
Yeah.
So we started the interviews really towards the middle of March. So it's been like a 3 week blitz of just it's awesome. I mean the
Yeah.
reason I was drawn to Macho is the reason a lot of other people are drawn to Macho, and so when you write a book and people want to talk about it, it's gratifying, even if it's an 8 hour a day, just like pod streams, YouTube shows. It's
Yes.
awesome.
Yeah. I've been there. Like the last one that I published, it's been a bit, was 2020, and it was a dog book. So like scheduling stuff, like I mean, Southern writers have to write a dog book at some point. Like I just believe that. And so like I had scheduled all these like different live streams, Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, all the usual stuff. And trying to get him to sit next to me and
Oh
everything
yeah.
was a bit of a challenge, but uh I wasn't much of a WWE guy growing up. But so I'd like to kind of just the storytelling aspect, like where did that interest in Randy Savage come from, and how'd you kind of parlay that into writing a biography about him?
Yeah, I was one of the millions and millions of kids growing up in the 80s who just was all in on WWF. I'm Hulk Hogan, Macho Man, Steamboat, like Junkyard Dog and all these guys. And so I watched everything. I believed everything. I was, 8 years old at his first WrestleMania, and 9, 10, 11 when he and Hulk Hogan had their clash and came together, and then the Mega Powers imploded. And if anyone's listening and doesn't know wrestling, I don't know. I don't know what to tell you. This was like Red Sox Yankees becoming friends and then going back to being rivals. This was a monumental moment in sports and entertainment, and it was just one of those things. He was our guy. Like Hulk Hogan was the face of the company, but for almost a lot of the diehard fans, not even diehard, casual fans, Macho Man was the one guy you couldn't take your eye off of, and he also had the best moves you could do in your house. Like his flying elbow off the rope. Like I hit my brother with that a million times. I would get him to lay on a beanbag. I'd jump off my bed and just hammer him. And so you add all that together, plus his catchphrases and this is
Yeah,
before social media. This is before everything. And this
yeah,
dude was still captivating. We were all still saying, oh yeah, and we're still doing cream of the crop. All this stuff that now
right.
people just shoot these memes at each other was in real time happening with, one show a week and a couple pay-per-views a year. So he's a
Yeah.
captivating guy.
Yeah. So like I know you started kind of this process what two-ish years ago, something like that.
Yeah, I wrote the proposal for it a little over 3 years ago,
Okay.
but I really wanted to make sure that I was able to interview his brother Lanny Poffo
Yeah.
before the book, as part of the research process. I mean, I interviewed hundreds of people, but
Right.
he was alive at the time, and it would have been really fraudulent almost to write this book without talking to the last living Poffo. So it took about a year
Yeah.
and a couple friends that I knew that we had mutual friends to get in touch with him. And then once I got in touch with him, things really kind of sped up because he was willing to be interviewed, which was huge for
Yeah.
me. And really, I would not have done the book if he wasn't willing.
Right.
And then from that point, it was about 2 years from starting it, really getting down the research, selling the proposal to a publisher, and then from the minute we sold the proposal, I guess to coming out this week, it was probably about 18, 19 months.
Okay. What did that research process like? Not the writing part, we'll get to that, but the research process, like what all went into that for you?
Yeah, so Randy, for people who don't know or have a little knowledge of Randy Savage, was his father was a pretty well-known wrestler in what's called the territories in the Midwest. He was a heel, but he made his living. His job was in pro wrestling and entertainment. And so Randy grew up, he was in first, second, third grade, traveling with his dad, like we might with our dad's jobs on occasion on the weekends. But for his dad, he'd walk into an arena and 6,000 people would be screaming, "You suck," and boo. And he had to kind of understand that this is a good thing for his dad. It means his dad's doing his job. He's getting a reaction and
Right.
drawing heat, as they would say in wrestling. And so my research started with Angelo Poffo, in the 50s and 40s, and that goes back to his military records. He was in the Navy. He famously set the world record for sit-ups, which was also the Navy record at the time. So he did 6,033 consecutive sit-ups that took him over
Oh
four
my
hours to do.
gosh.
Yeah, it's insane. And so he was a character unto himself. And because he was in the public eye, there were, as I'm sure you found, newspaperarchives.com, newspaper
Yeah.
archives. You dive in there, but then even more so public records. You can get into the business records of the events that were taking place. But it
Yeah.
starts, at least at that era, with newspapers for sure. You can almost follow the tour that they're on by the clippings and the
Right.
press clippings because they would show up at, a dairy farm and then a car, a car dealership, which
Yeah.
was selling 1951 Buicks, right? Like, and
Yeah.
Randall, and Angelo Poffo is there to sign autographs. The same stuff as today, just way
Right.
back then. And social media didn't exist, obviously, but people have to understand, like, newspapers were not only ubiquitous, they were many of the smaller towns had two a day. The city, New York
Yeah.
City or a big city had 40 or
Sure.
50 imprints that had a morning, sometimes even a lunchtime pamphlet, and then a dinner,
Yeah.
paper. So morning and evening run. And so I came up in newspapers, local newspapers, even when I was in
Mhm.
college. And even in high school, I interned at them. So I had a understanding of what this was like.
Yeah.
The bear in the woods. Go interview the neighbor. Everybody saw a bear. It's a big story, or like,
Yeah.
oh no, like a house has been abandoned and no one knows where the family went. Let's go research all these little local news
Yeah.
stories. And in the Midwest back then, all around Kentucky and Tennessee and Iowa and
Mhm.
Chicago and all these places, it was big news when wrestlers came into town. So that's where the research started, and it was from there. Just as you know, any name you come across who's interesting, hopefully they're alive. If they are,
Right.
track them down. And in that regard, especially for the older people, Facebook is amazing. It's like I don't use it really in
Yes.
general on my life. Day to day, I'll post certain things just as a writer, but not on my personal thing. But
Right.
you could find like a class reunion Facebook group for a class that graduated high school in 1970 or 65, and you
Yeah.
just start hitting them with what you're doing, and it's got a lot of terrible things about it, but you can find people pretty easily with it.
Yeah. Well, it helps you cast a wide net. Like
Yeah,
the book I'm working on, excuse me, is very much history related. So a lot of people that I would want to talk to have passed away. There are a few left who have memories of the World War II era, and some of the 40s when they were, maybe 5, 6 years old, that kind of thing. But
yeah,
I am almost exclusively relying on that newspapers.com. I mean, we're not trying to make this an ad for newspapers.com, but
yeah,
I mean, I use it daily, and it's so easy to go down just an absolute rabbit hole. Like you might be researching a particular topic and you see a name come up like twice, and now you're researching that name, and it just keeps
yeah.
branching off. How do you how do you kind of organize that? Like once you've kind of gone through, I know how overwhelming it can be for me going through all that. How do you organize it and then take it and, write it chronologically or effectively, for a book?
Yeah, I'm pretty old school with it. I usually go buy an accordion file or one or two, at Home Depot, I mean, at Office Depot or wherever, and I'll start labeling it. It really like paper labels. It's actually over there, and it's like, um, essentially, I'll start with. I have one of them is by people, so it's like important people, and it's not every little person. And then the other one is almost by like the just chronological topics, and I make them up as I go. I don't really know. In the beginning, obviously, I'll know like Angelo Poffo, Judy, his mom, and then Angelo's wrestling career, or if there's Bronco Lubitsch is a guy he had a thing with, so research that guy, and then you just kind of keep adding and adding and adding to it. But ultimately, what ends up happening is just as you said. On one hand, you see a name, they pop up a bunch. Okay, I got to learn about this guy. You're interviewing his whole world. At some point you have to understand. Okay, I have enough. I'm really only going to write a paragraph about this guy. I don't need 75
Yeah,
quotes from him or whatever. So you do have to have a bit of a governor on yourself. Um,
sure.
and then comes interviewing. The research is great and it really helps you out. But once I've exhausted something like newspapers.com or eBay is great, especially for wrestling. All the
Yeah,
old programs are out there. All the old WWE magazines are out there. You can find Macho Man's old, he played baseball, his spring training, magazines and things that the team
Wow.
was highlighting. So really, the modern tech is a great resource to find all this old stuff on all these guys. And YouTube is incredible. You find interviews,
Yeah.
just random stuff that people uploaded that they had on their VHS from 1977 or local TV access from 1973. I mean, so once you start pulling all these things out and you start putting your list of names together, it's always different than the list you put together. The publisher proposal where they buy it is at a certain point when you get deep enough in your career, it's great to get them interested, but
Yeah.
it's mostly useless. I mean, I don't look at that thing. You sell it, it's great, your agent's happy, you're happy, the money comes in, that's what you do to be a writer. And I don't look at the proposal again, it's useless. I haven't talked to anybody yet. It's just like, this is what I found without actually doing work. This is just the research that I found to get it going. I haven't talked to a soul. I haven't spent hours and hours doing all these things. So once you start talking to people, the whole game changes. I use a version of the Mike Tyson quote of everybody has a plan for a fight till they get punched in the face. I use the same quote for a book. Everybody has a proposal for a book until you talk to the first person. And then the first person,
Yeah.
if any writer or journalist who's worth anything in the world, the last question is always, who else do I have to talk to? What story am I missing? And then you're off. They almost always will give you one person that you never heard of and a
Oh yeah.
story that you didn't know about. And then that sort of splinters. And it's like it
Yeah.
becomes this tree branch. And yeah, sometimes you chase and nothing happens. You hear a kernel of a great story and you follow it all the way through, and it's just no one can verify it, or it's not
Right.
good. It's actually not a good story. It's boring or whatever it is.
Yeah.
But you have to pull on all those strings because that's when, honestly, you find gold.
It really is. Like, I'll give you one example. So like the book that I'm working on, like I said, it's mostly a history book, but I'm including lots of like people's stories, so it's not just straight history encyclopedia type thing. It's a history of a place, it's a story of a place. But I had heard rumors forever that this is before I was born, that Michael Jackson came to this particular area, and this was just like a neighborhood. Like, this isn't an arena, this isn't a concert, this is just streets and sidewalks. And I'm like, the Michael Jackson. So I start doing research, find a little bit of about the time frame that he was in Birmingham, Alabama. And I like you said, you talk to one person and they give you somebody else. Well, one of those somebody else's I talked to was like, Michael Jackson came to our house in 1984 when he was on his tour or whatever. And this is before, obviously, before Michael Jackson went a little
Yeah.
crazy. And so he was still doing the Jehovah's Witness thing that was a big deal to his family.
Mhm.
And so he had practiced or rehearsed or whatever at the BJCC in Birmingham. And that following day, Sunday morning, he went out witnessing with a group of Jehovah's Witnesses and came to this area that I'm writing about and came in disguise. Like, imagine, well, I forget the Mets manager's name that got tossed from the game, Bobby Valentine.
Valentine,
And
yeah.
yeah, and came, with mustache and hair done different and stuff like that. And he went door to door and got chased down the street by a dog. And so now I've got this, like, I'm writing about a very specific local place, but I've got this national tie-in that Michael Jackson came there as a Jehovah's Witness and was chased down the street by a dog.
Yeah, those stories are the ones that, like I said, maybe 60% of the time they're nothing and nothing
Yeah.
happens. And it's like, oh, yeah, old Mabel used to say that and we never heard about it. She's the only one who ever
Yeah.
saw it. And then all of a sudden you'll get one that's just solid gold that where you're
Yeah.
like, that really happened. And even better if you can get, once you know that story, oftentimes like the local paper back then probably covered it. I mean, you can, if you
Yeah.
really can dig into the archives, I've had
Yeah.
several over all my books. Macho is my 10th, where a story like that was a little bit, and then you get some phrase or a name and you put it in
Yeah.
either a newspaper.com type thing, or you call the local town who had, the paper that's been there for
Right.
80 years and you ask somebody to look, and they do an old microfilm search and it's like, oh yeah, that was a wild incident. In fact,
Yeah.
the next day we did an interview with Michael Jackson or whoever about this,
Yeah.
and it's like, oh my God. So the only danger is it can never end. At some point,
Yeah.
especially with in publishing, you have a there's a release date and there's a date that the manuscript has to be in, and there's a date that the publisher needs to do layout and interior and fact checking and proofreading. I mean, people don't know the runway of a book is so far in advance. It's like this guy, there's a writer friend of mine named Dart Adams who writes in Boston, and he always says writing a book is like living in the future. It's like
Yeah.
you're sitting here writing a book that no one's going to read for 2 years, that is to a timeline where once you finish it, you're probably going to put it down and not see it again for 3 or 4 months, and then get a whole draft back and jump right back in,
Right back
another like little time jump. And so with these books, that you have to know at some point, okay, I've got enough and I found amazing things. And you just know, no matter what, even in Macho, you're going to leave some great stories on the table that,
in.
and it sucks. I mean, every time, especially now I'm doing, hundreds of these interviews. There's people who host wrestling podcasts and things who I interviewed for the book who will be like, a couple months after we talked, I was walking the dog and I remembered this great story.
Yes.
And it's like, so
Yep.
you put the best thing that you can together. And you're gonna have people in every book I've ever done who, after it's out, will read it and be like, "How did you not talk to me?" And it's like, dude, I talked to 295 people. No
Yeah.
one mentioned you. I've been posting about this on social media for 2 years. Like,
Right.
I'm sorry, man. Like, I
Yeah.
missed you. I worked with Macho Straight for 6 months straight in Albany, and it's like, all right, it's amazing, and I would have loved
Yeah.
to. But at
Exactly.
some point, you just realize he probably met 50,000 people in his life. I didn't get to talk to all of them.
No, it's the impossible thing. I've got a list in this room of names that I need to interview, people that I have talked to, people that I need to talk to, and the list is just never ending. Like, and some people you'll get that you're like, oh, this person's gonna have good stories. Like you've heard about their experiences, that kind of thing, and they talk for 15 minutes and they give you nothing. And
Yeah,
then there will be somebody that you're like, well, they're on the list. I'm gonna call them. You call them, and literally you talk for 3 hours and you don't know where to begin with everything they gave you.
yeah.
Um, so it's a mixed bag. But so for you, for this book specifically, the research, the writing, how do you, like, because you're juggling, right? There's still life, there's still kids, there's still other jobs, that kind of thing. How do you keep yourself on task and make sure that you get it done? What are you doing daily to reach that goal?
Yeah, my days, no matter what I have going on, what book or what I'm working on, I wake up 5:30 and hit the gym first. I can't sit down and do the writing if I haven't like worn my body out. I get
Yeah,
so antsy if I just, every now and then I swim too. So a couple days a week, that the pool that I swim at is lunchtime is the better time to do laps and stuff. So I don't really, I'll do like a jog in the morning. But I found even on days where I'm like, screw it, like I was up late writing or watching the Celtics game or
yeah,
SmackDown or something, like, and I can't sleep too late. I have to get up for the kid. I'll sleep late, meaning like 6:30, just when I get my kids up to get them to school. My
right,
wife's up and everything like that. But I'm miserable. Like I can't just sit. I need to have like sweat and like be
yeah,
tired to the point where like I don't want to stand anymore. I get up, I do that, get the kids ready. I bike my son to school, walk my dog. So by the time I sit down and actually start working, 8:30 ish, when the kids are gone or whatever, or I go to a local coffee shop down the street a lot. I've got like 3 hours of activity in, so it's like, okay, now it's 3 or 4 hours. So to get to the meat of, if anyone listening is a writer, is that point, that 8:30 to 11 o'clock, 11:30 is like, that's just sort of an impenetrable block. Not now because I'm promoting, but when I'm writing or researching, that's just headphones in, writing if I'm already at the writing stage, or that is just, I'm just calling people for hours. I'm not on, I might jump in and out of Twitter or something just to kind of distract my mind a little bit. But like the secret that I found for totally only me is just chunks, chunks of
yeah,
time. You can't, I do have other writing projects, even other ghost writing projects for books that I work on. I do try, now that I'm deeper in my career and I have the luxury of some success, to like just, really block out weeks and weeks on a project. I
yeah.
find that I didn't have that luxury early. You just have to, you pay your bills, you got to do a lot of work.
Uh-huh.
When you bounce, task switch back and forth, I think your writing suffers and your focus suffers. So even if what I'll do a lot of times in those days is, okay, I know I have, a magazine article due, and I have a copy editing thing, and I'm editing this book for somebody else, and you're really kind of figuring it out. I would still then say, okay, until noon, that's my time. I am going to only
Right.
work on this book or this project that I'm working on for me till noon, have lunch, get the kids, whatever. And then the afternoon is work time. So you got to figure out, and look, schedule's hard. There have been a lot of, especially when you write, a lot of late nights where you're just
Yeah.
like, man, just gonna have to figure this out. But the big chunks are what I found work best for me, where I truly say, like, as lame as it sounds, like, okay, it's 8:30, you're writing till 11:30, and that's what you're gonna do.
Uh,
And for me, it really helps. I have a coffee shop, and then there's a library also down the road too.
yeah.
It helps to switch locations for me. So I
Sure.
kind of like it's like you kind of like an over the top, like you turn your hat backwards, like in the lame writer version.
Yeah.
Like there's
I
something that
get it.
happens when I get up, get out, sit down at a coffee
Yeah.
shop. They know me. I have a regular. I just order a small black coffee. I don't think special, and put my headphones in, little background music or whatever, and just go. Like that's work time. I think you do need
Yes.
an office or space to go, and
Sure.
even at night when I'm really in the thick of it and I want to knock out more words or whatever, I will go to there's a Barnes and Noble that's open a little bit later by us, or like I said, changing locations. I might just go outside. I live in Florida, so it's
Yeah.
nice most of the time. It
Yeah.
might just be like, all right, I'm going to write out back for an hour or two from 9 to 10.
Mhm.
But I found that changing spots really helps me. And then not to go too deep, but like when you're writing these kind of books, you have a word count. A publisher says,
Right.
we expect 80 to 100,000 words or whatever. So once I start writing, I actually do the thing. I'll look at my calendar and go, okay, so I got to hit 750 words a day to safely make it, or I'm going to
Okay.
aim for 1,000 words. As you know, like there's days where you do 1,800 words and it feels like you haven't even lifted a finger. It just pours out of
Yeah.
you. And
Yeah.
there's days where you're like, oh my God, everything I write sucks. I'm not going to use one word I wrote
Yeah.
today. And so that's why I kind of put together for me, it's usually about 1,000 word a day average. And for for 100,000 word book, that's 4 to 6 months of writing and editing and all that. Adding in plenty of days that suck, days where you delete everything, days where you go crazy. And then you build in a month to put it down. Then
Right.
go through it fresh eyes myself over, and then I'll hand it in. That's loosely how I'll do it.
Okay. How no, that's I understand that. Like especially the changing location. Like I write a lot right here where I'm sitting, but I go to our library. It has an archives room, which I need just from writing a lot of history stuff. I need that room anyway. But I've found that often I'll go there, and if I've already done a ton of research, if I go in to that room not needing to open any of those archival boxes, I'll just sit there for 6 hours and write.
Yeah.
It's just a different location. So for this book, how hard is it to write a biography about a guy who passed away 13 years ago?
It's in one hand, it's easy because everything he said has been said.
Yeah,
There's nothing new. His opinions haven't changed over the years,
sure.
and everybody you're talking to has now all their memories have sort of consolidated. And so like you said, 13. It's been a while, so
Yeah,
it's not like he just passed away yesterday. I will say having his brother for the early part of my research was extraordinarily helpful because he was really like a conduit to Randy. They were best friends. They worked together their whole careers.
yeah,
So that was really helpful. But it was definitely different because luckily he was in the public eye for so long. He had a zillion interviews. And even in the newspapers, like we mentioned, so many interviews back then, all the promo was radio and newspaper. And a lot of the big guest spots, whether it was on Arsenio or Regis and Kathy Lee or all the old shows that mattered, you can watch them, right? So thankfully, YouTube
right.
helps with that. Also, I think in this case, it helped a lot that I was actually alive and a fan and present
Sure.
for the peak of Macho Madness. So I could really, and what I tried to do with the book, I could really put the readers into the seat of what this was like front row
Yeah.
as a fan at this time. If it was, there's people I know, Jane Levy wrote Babe Ruth and all. Like I always wonder, like, and, someone like that. There's never ending amount of research, but you didn't live during that time period, and you're not really talking to anybody who was a fan of his seeing him play. So I think that kind of played into, there wasn't a shortage of people who he crossed paths with, whether in wrestling or just they saw him at rap
Yeah.
album signing or they saw him at any kind of event, right? So I think it was fine. I didn't look at it too much of a challenge. There's no all the people even who are his contemporaries are still relatively young for nowadays. He would have only be 72 right now if he was alive. So it isn't
Yeah.
like he would have been 97 and a lot of the
Yeah.
people who knew him are older. They are
Right.
still pretty active and around and good memories and still telling
Sure.
stories. So not too much of a hindrance. Of course, you always want to talk to the person if you can. I mean, when I did my biography of Charlie Ward, he was kind enough to just be available. And we became
Mhm.
friends. We're friends now. It's amazing. We text during March Madness. Like it's amazing how these things sort of happen. But he's
Yeah.
just a great guy. But for our purposes of this conversation, he was just willing to talk. And that is,
Yeah.
especially as you uncover research, you kind of become like a confidant because they don't know all this. They didn't know all these things that are being written about him.
Mm.
Did you know after this happened at Florida State, Florida, this happened in the stands, and then I had no idea. Oh, really? I didn't know. So and so said that.
Yeah.
Oh, I'll have to text him. That's really nice. I didn't know they said that
Right.
in
That's
1994.
cool. That's
And
cool.
so that was absent with Macho, but like I said, I had his brother early on, and that was really helpful.
Yeah. So I mean, I know you've done. We'll kind of wrap with this stuff, but like you've done the Charlie Ward. I know you did Nate Robinson. Now Macho. Who's on the biography bucket list?
I can't tell you which one I'm doing next. Be happy to come on and talk with you.
When you
Where
can talk
where
about it.
Yeah, it's not even like a confidentially thing. It's just we're doing all the macho work now, and then
Yeah.
it's a pretty big book, and so
Okay.
when I announce it and everything, I think people won't be surprised knowing the kind of books that I write. It'll fit right in,
Sure.
very sophisticated meathead books and biceps type of topic. So
There
I'm
you go.
excited for it, but yeah, a couple months maybe over the summer. Let's let Macho have his day.
There you go. Well, so just to end on that, where can people get the Macho book and how do they follow you? All that kind of stuff.
Yeah, so the best place is check jonfinkel.com, jonfinkel.com. You go on there. The first big thing is to sign up for my newsletter. I have a newsletter called Books and Biceps, which is I share a weekly book recommendation, a lot of author interviews.
Yeah.
I share workout motivation, gym stuff, meathead stuff, some of my columns, a lot of behind the scenes stuff on my own books. So it's getting pretty big size. We're around 14,000 readers now
Yeah.
every week on every Friday, which is great. So sign up for that, and that gets you, all the stuff a lot of stuff we covered. My future book will be in. Everything I do is announced there first.
Yeah.
And then if you're on Twitter or social media anywhere, it's at Jon_Finkel on Twitter and on Instagram. And I'm pretty active on there. I've had a lot of awesome, thankfully, reviews and spots for Macho Man recently.
Yeah.
And so I've been sharing all that with the wrestlers I've been talking to and who have thankfully endorsed it and things like that. So yeah, go on there and hit me up. I like to talk to people and interact. So if you order the book and
Yeah.
get it, I've been sharing pictures of everybody, people on beaches, people skiing, people with their backyards, people giving it to their kids, doing their own ooh yeah impression. So it's great.
That's got to feel good. I am one of those 14,000 subscribers. It is a great newsletter.
Thank you.
I look forward to it every Friday. So, well, I appreciate you hopping on, John, and talking about this new book. And sounds like it's doing really well. So hopefully that continues, and we'll look forward to what's next later.
Yeah, I thank you for having me on. It's always fun talking to you.
All right, appreciate you, John.
You got it.